Hey, this is Chris. I want to talk about abortion in the post-Dobbs world. That seems to be a big topic of public conversation right now, and I think it's an important thing to explore. I am a Christian, and I want to explore it from this Christian pro-life perspective, but I want to broaden it beyond that. I want to have a discussion with those who are pro-choice as well as others who are pro-life and begin to ask the question, is there any possibility of developing consensus even in some areas when we begin to talk about abortion in the United States? So I wanted to just have a little bit of that discussion through this video, or try to provoke some discussion or prompt some discussion and see where things might go. The first thing I want to observe, though, is that abortion's not going to come to an end through legislation. I remember many years ago, pro-life activists would be always saying, if we can just overturn Roe versus Wade, then we'll get rid of abortion in the United States. We're going to end abortion. We're going to end up these horror, the evil, and really building it up to create a sense of urgency that if we could only get rid of Roe versus Wade, there would be just an end to abortion. But the reality is, statistics show that in 2023, the first full year after the Dobbs decision, abortion actually went up 10%. Rather than reducing abortion, it seems to be having the opposite effect. In fact, far from ending abortion, Dobbs created a situation where in many blue states, there is still an unrestricted right of abortion. There's no checks, no balances to that. And in many other states, abortion the laws just don't address it. So it's legal, it's not illegal. In other states, abortion is more regulated, but allowed up to, in some cases, 12, 15 weeks. So there's only a few really minority of states where abortion has been made illegal and very, very heavily regulated. In fact, a lot of red states, the citizens are putting referendum on the ballot to put abortion as a right into their state constitution. So it doesn't matter what the legislature does, it becomes a right. So I find that kind of interesting to see this as somebody who really does value life from that perspective of we really don't want to have abortion. Abortion's not a good thing for any society to have. And yet, I think as somebody who's pro-life, I sometimes don't remember that there are people on the pro-choice side that are pro-choice for various reasons, but don't just celebrate or want abortion. They think it's not a good thing, but they want to make it legally available. And I think that's where the discussion needs to be had between these people who are pro-life and pro-choice, who really agree on the fact that abortion isn't a good thing, but just disagree on how to proceed and what should be done for it, to address the whole issue that would lead a woman to decide to have an abortion. I do think that most Americans, when it comes to personal views, are pro-life, but I also do see that a majority of Americans are pro-choice when it comes to law and what the law will allow in the states. And we see this by these places like Kansas and Ohio, conservative states that are passing pro-choice amendments to their state constitutions. I think there's some issues really that are preventing us from really having any kind of productive conversations between those who are pro-life and pro-choice. And I want to just mention a few. I think, first of all, the pro-life and pro-choice movements have become industries with vested interest in not resolving issues around abortion because they make money off the polarization. They make money off of promoting division. So we have two industries, both on opposite sides of the issue, pro-life and pro-choice, that have vested financial interest in promoting and preserving some kind of conflict between the two. That's their business model. Whether they're nonprofits or for-profits, it's just a business model, and they've been doing this for so long, and there's such a vested interest. It's hard for those big organizations, those leaders, to have any kind of productive conversation on the issue. The second thing is political parties over the last 40 years have become so polarized to the point where you don't see very many pro-choice Republicans in national office like you used to many years ago, and you don't see many pro-life Democrats in Congress or Senate or things like you used to many years ago. It's become very polarized on the issue, and so because of that, both sides add their respective positions, Republicans pro-life, Democrats pro-choice, into their battle for election and office. So that becomes a big issue because our politicians have a vested interest in using that issue, the issue of human life, of abortion, as a political tool to get election. So I think that's a second part of the problem. The third part of the problem is when you talk to pro-choice and pro-life people, there are different degrees of belief and for different reasons. And then when we get into the realm of the philosophical and religious underpinnings of one's belief, there's even more diversity. So when we talk about pro-life and pro-choice, there's lots of different reasons, there's lots of different degrees in which people feel or how people feel about the issue. So that makes discussion really difficult, the idea of a consensus. Another issue is that there's decades of angry and irresponsible rhetoric on both sides, making straw men, demonizing, creating an environment where people that are pro-life and pro-choice are encouraged to abhor and despise one another and see one another as enemies, and not recognize that we've got this issue of abortion, and maybe if we got together and just had some fruitful discussions, we could begin to address the concerns of both groups. It really is going to take, people like me and like you who are concerned about the issue and willing to discuss it from either perspective, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, to come together and to begin to have these fruitful discussions that could create a consensus in the greater society that everybody else would have to respond to. And I think that's the way we're going to deal with abortion, especially as a Christian. I feel that influence and persuasion of my position and my beliefs to people broader than me. If I could maybe have a conversation with people who are pro-choice so they could understand my concerns and I can understand them, and we can begin to come together and deal with the issue. Because for me, it is a very significant and severe moral issue, because we're talking about human life. The child in the womb is a human life. And I know pro-choice people understand that. But this is an important discussion for people. And for some of us, it is a very, very important discussion. One of the things I noted as I was doing a little bit of research in the latest CDC data shows that it's really 93.5% of abortions occur in the first trimester. That's up to 13 weeks. So 93.5% of abortions occur in the first 13 weeks, which is by far the vast majority. Another about 5.7% occur between 14 and 20 weeks. So pretty much over 99% of abortions are occurring in the first 20 weeks of pregnancy in the United States. There's only 0.9% or less than 1% that occur 21 weeks and after. And it seems to me, though the number of abortions at 21 weeks or later is less than 1% of all abortions, it makes sense in a way to begin discussions around those, what I would call late-term abortions, because I think that's where we're most likely to develop a consensus. Not that it's the majority of abortions, but I think it's the place where we could have the most fruitful discussion and maybe come to consensus. So what do I see as the main issues in these kinds of discussions that we would have? And first of all, I think the first issue is this discussion about when does a fetus become a baby? That is, when is personhood realized? When does the child in the womb become a person independent of their mother? The second big question that we debate is who decides when a woman can or can't get an abortion? These are the two big issues I think that we need to discuss, because in the pro-life movement, we tend to talk in terms of personhood of the child in the womb, and when we think and believe personhood is achieved, when it is realized. On the pro-choice side, the discussion tends to be around who decides when a woman can or can't have an abortion. Who is the decider? And I think those two questions, though, rather than being taken independently, if we take them together, we can have a discussion. So I want to try to do that in this video and just kind of go through a few things, a few thoughts that I have, and maybe in the comments you can share other thoughts. I do want it to be civil. Again, if we're going to try to move beyond some of this polarizing politics and a lot of the venom and the hatred and everything in our society for people that are different than us, the way we begin to model that and do that is when we discuss things, even issues that can be quite divisive or controversial. We want to do that in a manner that shows respect for the other side. Yes, we share our views, and maybe we can focus on the intensity or try to express in words the intensity of our views without necessarily engaging in personal attacks and assumptions about other people. So first of all, I think, and I believe that there's no reason that both pro-life and pro-choice people can agree that once a fetus has come to term and can live independently of his or her mother outside the womb, then it is a human life worthy of protection. It is a person. And killing a person that is living independently outside of the womb of his or her mother is murder. That it is murder to take a life like that. Unfortunately, I think some pro-life activists, in a way to scare people into their position, to talk about these fringe pro-choice people that will talk about post-birth abortions, that the baby is alive and breathing, and we're gonna kill the child after 9 months. The mother doesn't want it, and 2 hours after the baby's born, she said, "I don't want the baby. We're gonna kill the baby," and then all these pro-choice people are supposedly just gonna go along with that and kill the baby. And I don't know any serious pro-choice person that advocates for anything like that. They recognize that it's murder. And if you're pro-life, it doesn't do any good to mischaracterize and tell stories like that to try to scare people, because it doesn't work. And all it does is create further division. And I think everybody can agree, pro-choice and pro-life, that if a baby is born and able to live independently outside of his or her mother's womb and is living independently of her outside of her womb, in other words, is born and alive and breathing, then to take that child's life is murder. And thus, there should be laws applied against murder. A child that's born and living and breathing independently is a person and a United States citizen and deserves the protection of the laws of the United States. I don't really see that as a real issue, but a lot of pro-lifers make an issue by listening to these fringe philosophers and other people or politicians that are trying to score points that are clueless, don't know really what they're talking about, making just these absurd statements, but I don't see anything really catching hold anywhere of that to happen. I think the real issue is abortion between the time at 21 weeks, we're about at the point of fetal viability and a full-term pregnancy. So we're talking about in between this fetal viability and a full-term pregnancy. And what do I mean by fetal viability or the viability of the baby? Is that with medical assistance, a baby can live outside the womb independent of his or her mother. In that case, the baby is a person and a citizen of the United States that receives the full protection of law. Often they are in neonatal ICU units, and they're being cared for, and they need medical assistance to be alive. A full-term baby is going to still need the assistance to live because they can't feed themselves, they can't take care of themselves, their body temperature is regulated, all those kinds of things. So that doesn't, we've got to think about that. But at 22 weeks, a child pretty much that is born will need medical assistance. At 32 weeks, it's just increasingly more likely that they won't need medical assistance to live outside the womb, although they'll need care. So at some point, a fetus, a baby, I consider a baby, I'm using the term fetus more because this is the term that's just generally used in society and in the medical field. I'm a nurse. We tend to talk in those terms, medical terms, but there is a point where the fetus becomes an independent person. And I believe personally that a fetus, a baby, is a person from conception. Oh, that is based on my religious beliefs, and I recognize that my own religious beliefs and convictions, that people are going to have other beliefs and other convictions and aren't necessarily going to be on the same page with that. But I think there's got to be a way where we can come to a consensus and be thinking about when does a baby become a person. Some will say they become a person when they're born and they breathe their first breath after 40 weeks of pregnancy. And there are people like me that say, oh no, the baby is a person from conception onward. But at least maybe we could have this discussion and say, can we at least, for the sake of broad consensus, say at least fetal viability is the time when a baby in the womb becomes a person and is able to receive some protections in terms of their life. That a person, when asked the question, do you want to live or die, is going to say, I want to live. And that it's safe to make the presumption that a person, even inside the womb of a mother, who is a person and if they would be able to express their desire, they would say, I want to live. Even in evolutionary framework, a naturalistic framework where there is no divine, there's nothing but the material world would talk about the principle of the survival of the fittest, that living organisms want to survive, they want to live. And so I think it's reasonable to say that a child at some point in the womb, if they had a voice, would say, I want to live. So we get to this next question is, who would decide whether an abortion should occur after 21 weeks? Now, the pro-choice movement says that the decision of life or death for that fetus, that baby in the womb, rests with the woman and her doctor through every stage of pregnancy. But there's this baby in the womb, and at least if we could say after 21 weeks, begin to talk about them as a person. And what happens when you have somebody else who might want something different than the mother, if they were able to speak? And it seems increasingly likely that a child in the womb should be considered a person at some point. And pro-life people like me want that baby's presumed wishes to be part of the decision with regard to abortion. And this is where, I'm starting to have some thoughts. In my work with at-risk children, the work that my wife and I have done over the years, there is guardian ad litem. Guardian ad litems will show up in court and represent the interests of the child, not the parent, not the state, but the interests of the child. And that often happens in divorce proceedings where there's a guardian ad litem. They're speaking on the interests of the child, not the father, not the mother, but the child. And my thought is this: in circumstances where an abortion between 21 and 40 weeks comes up, if that's an issue, that maybe there should be some form of guardian ad litem that could serve as a voice for the child's interest, and that they could enter into this discussion with the woman and her doctor to explore options other than abortion for the child to live. I think I do believe these late-term abortions, after 21 weeks, in most circumstances, unless medically necessary, really should be illegal. I'll be honest with you about that. I would put the illegality of abortion earlier than that, but that's a discussion maybe for another video. But the problem is that making abortion illegal doesn't solve the problem. And I'm realizing that more and more, that what I might want may not be achievable. And since I value life, I'm trying to figure out other ways, such as making this video, to begin to find ways to discuss abortion in a way that could be very helpful to move the discussion forward and move a consensus forward so that we truly could reduce abortions in the United States. I just really wish, unless they're medically necessary, they didn't happen at all. So I do think that this idea maybe of having a third party come in whose sole interest is representing the interests of the child in the womb, to be part of the discussion about these kinds of elective late-term abortions. Because in my experience, most women, in fact, virtually all women who are going to carry a child through 21 weeks of pregnancy, for them all of a sudden to want to have an elective abortion, there's some kind of radical change going on in their life. Something is happening, whether it's mental illness, homelessness, job loss, loss of a spouse or significant other. There's something going on that leads someone to say after 21 weeks that it's not medically necessary, I need an abortion. And I do think that we need to be very aware of that, very aware of the needs and what's going on in the woman's life, in the pregnant woman's life, and not just discount that. And I think that's where, having these discussions and bringing in people to discuss options and to give more options. It would be nice for doctors to be able to have resources and have something that could point to a different choice. Now, there's another discussion too, where doctors have a vested interest, a financial interest in performing abortions rather than the good of the woman involved. And that's another problem, because we have these abortion clinics that are independent of medical facilities. And since that's their sole stream of income, they've got to do abortions and as many as possible to be financially viable. And I question whether those freestanding abortion clinics are really the best for us as a society, and that maybe when we talk about abortions being performed, that they're in the broader medical system, so there's not this big financial interest to do abortions, And so doctors don't face that pressure, financial pressure, and can really focus in on what's good and what's best and what's going on in the life of the mother. But they also need resources to refer them to. I think there needs to be in our society, beyond just crisis pregnancy centers, there needs to be greater support for women who are pregnant and experience a significant life change that really alters their life and puts them into this state of at one point being excited about having a child, or at least willing to carry the child to term, to all of a sudden saying, I don't want that baby anymore. We do need to provide more resources as a society. I think that's an important aspect of this, that being pro-life isn't just saying we need a law against abortion. We need to support pregnant women and pregnant mothers every way we can, and be able to address some of the needs that come up and some of the issues that come up in their life that would lead them to want to have an abortion after 21 weeks. But then there's another question, and I think most abortions after 21 weeks, I'm kind of looking for the statistics, but I believe that probably most of them are related to medical emergencies. I know that there's probably some that are elective. I'm not going to deny that, and that's really sad to me. But I do think the vast majority of them are related to medical emergencies. And I think there's two types of medical emergency. There's an urgent situation where we've got to take care of this as quickly as possible. Then there are medical emergencies where we've got to provide treatment now and to save the life of this mother, that child, that fetus, that baby in the womb is probably going to lose his or her life because of the work we're doing right now to save the life of the mother. I do think when you talk about medical urgency, that it would be helpful able to get another opinion. Often we get second opinions. All the time second opinions happen between doctors, maybe of different specialties, come in and look at a medical situation, and then they come and develop the consensus, and maybe one has some awareness of some kind of thing that can be done that the other doesn't. You know, doctors don't know everything and they specialize, and maybe it's helpful when somebody has this urgent medical situation in which the mother's life is greatly at risk, to bring in a neonatal doctor or somebody else that can speak to the situation and answer the question, can we save both the life of the mother and the baby? What can be done? Is there's something can be done, and to try to foster that and just say, when you do that, when you get these second opinions, and if this medical consensus is that the only way to save the life of this mother is going to lead to the loss of life for the baby in the womb, as long as there's this medical consensus and opinions have been gotten, that there should be no legal repercussions for doctors that are doing work in good faith, that they're in good faith trying to do that. And presumably at this point, the mother is conscious and able to make decisions, or has a spouse or significant other who would be maybe the father of the child, that would be able to say, yeah, no, this is what we need to do. So there's both consent and the doctors are acting in good faith. I don't think there should be legal repercussions for abortions in that kind of situation when it's truly being done to save the life of the mother. Then there's the really medical emergencies, a car accident, and the paramedics are bringing the mother into the ER, and they're frantically working to save her life, and they bring her into the ER, and the ER doctor, as the code team is working and doing everything they can, and they're trying to get her to emergency surgery and everything, and the realization is in the moment that to save her life, what's happening is the child is losing his or her life. That in all the work to save the life of the mother, which is often just rapid, and people are acting in good faith and following procedures and doing what's right, and then the life of the baby is lost in that medical emergency, that there really should be no legal repercussions for medical personnel performing their duties according to their training and the standard procedures. Because that does unfortunately happen. I've known it happen in the medical field. It's sad and it's tragic, but there are times when it's one of those difficult situations where the physician and the medical team is focused on saving the mother's life, and unfortunately in that process, and sadly in that process, the life of the child is lost. And I do think as a society, we need to recognize that the loss of that child's life, we would grieve over it and we'd be sad, but in the act of saving the woman, when the doctors are acting in good faith, that there should be no legal repercussions. And I think that's one of the most important consensus things that we can come to, is in late term situations where the child in the womb loses their life with good faith medical efforts, that there should be no repercussions to the doctor or to the mother when that happens. And I think that's a good first step for pro-lifers and pro-choice people to come together and develop this consensus. And again, the second one I mentioned just a bit earlier is that between 21 weeks and 40 weeks to come to consensus that there needs to be some kind of way to intervene and help the woman who wants to have a late-term abortion and maybe have a guardian ad litem or somebody that can speak on behalf of the child in the womb to somehow work out a solution and not have this late-term abortion. Because even if we make these late-term abortions illegal, there's still going to be women that feel like they need to take the life of their child because something's happened in their life. And we do need to come around and be supportive in helping these women that come to these decisions, these mothers, to make this decision that it's better for the child to be aborted than for me to continue the pregnancy at this point. And we really need to explore that more. So while I favor making late-term abortions illegal under most circumstances except for medical necessity, I do think that we do need to be very, very sensitive to what would lead somebody to get an abortion after 21 weeks, and not just pass a law, but let's find more ways to support pregnant women and to be able to address the issues that come up in their life through pregnancy, because pregnancy is a very vulnerable time for a woman. I recognize that. I watched my wife with several pregnancies, and I realized that it is a very, very vulnerable time when she was pregnant for her in her life, and she was very sensitive to any life changes. And so we need to just recognize that that's where people are at. I don't know if this video is how helpful it would be, but my heart in sharing this is really to start promoting some discussion, because I really don't think all this legal battle, all this political battle is going to do much in changing abortion in the United States. I think we need to have more conversations like the one I'm trying to have, so that we can more effectively deal with abortion and try to bring it down to a very minimal amount. Now, this is a long video, so if I see enough interest, enough people watching it and commenting and sharing it, then I'll make some more videos. I'm just trying to see how much interest people have in having this kind of discussion that is not vitriolic. Thank you, and have a good day.